When a person hears the words environmental activism, it typically evokes something pretty strong. Concern, anger, sadness, frustration, at one end of the spectrum, pride, excitement, hope, joy, and many others at the opposite. But what can we learn from each other? I'm Jeff Durso, and this is In Focus. If you're joining us on Geneva Community Radio, welcome. And if you are joining us on fingerlakes1.com, YouTube, or Spotify, welcome to you as well. My guest today is Yvonne Taylor. And if you've followed environmental activism over the last 2 decades here in the Finger Lakes or upstate New York, odds are you've seen her name, heard her voice, or know exactly who she is. And maybe her work as a leading environmental activist evokes one of those feelings I mentioned off the top. Not uncommon. She started a group in 2011 called Gas Free Seneca to oppose a gas storage facility at the southern end of Seneca Lake. That organization grew into Seneca Lake Guardian. It's a powerhouse in the environmental activism space, and they're doing way more than holding picket signs, silently protesting things like data centers, landfilling, gas storage, incinerators, or whatever else comes along. They're involved in legislation, the legal battles, and much more. But whether you agree or disagree with the politics carried by environmental activists, I think this conversation is useful. I wanted to have Yvonne on this week because, like a lot of my recent guests, she cared enough to act. That's where it all traces back to. Let me say that one more time. Yvonne Taylor cares enough to act. Not once, not twice, not a few times a year when there's a local protest, not just during election cycles, all the time. She has made caring about the environment, preserving this region's natural resources, something she's willing to give everything to each and every day. That's noteworthy, but it's also instructive of the kind of effort that's necessary to fix the biggest issues we face as a society. We spend a lot of time here talking about the big ones: housing, population decline, affordability, energy, and some others too. But fixing all of these issues requires a lot of people to give as much as Yvonne has given over the last 2 decades. And that's tough. You have to wake up every day and fight for the outcome you want to see. We talked about that, what it looks like day to day, the highs and lows, as well as what it takes to keep going. My email, if you want to contact the show, is josh@fingerlakes1.com. Enjoy. It's been so long since we've talked. I really wanted to go back to the beginning because I didn't realize that it had been as long as it has for the advocacy work that you've been doing now. We're over 15 years. When you think back to before Gas Free Seneca, even when it was just an idea in your brain, what do you remember most about that period of your life?
Gosh, well, we call ourselves accidental activists because we had no plans or ambitions to be, fighting environmental fights. I was just in the process of building my house on land that's been in my family for generations. It's a dream I'd had for 25 years. And that's where my focus was. I'm just going to build my house and live happily ever after. And then, this proposal came up for gas storage across the lake from where I was going to be building this house. And that's what started the whole thing.
Is there a bit of, and we're going to get into everything that's happened over the years. Is there any part of you that has to occasionally pinch yourself and just kind of get through the surrealness of how much has happened since those beginning days?
Absolutely. And one of the things that we did in celebration of this milestone is we created a slideshow of photographs of everything that's gone on. And when you look at that and the number of events and trips to Albany and people that got involved so many times, year in and year out, it's overwhelming, to be reminded of all that.
Does it feel like several lifetimes has passed since the gas storage facility?
It sure does. In some ways, it feels like it's impossible to believe that even happened. And then in other ways, you look at it and it's like, oh my gosh, that was only I can't, how did that, this time has flown and it seems like it was yesterday in some respects.
When it comes to the technical work, the work behind the scenes that goes into the work you guys do, people will see the front facing part of it, but not realize just how much work is going into it behind the scenes. When you think about the technical aspects of advocating for an entire region's environment, what were what was maybe like the biggest lesson that you guys learned in those early days?
I think the exciting parts definitely happened in the public view. The less exciting parts were, the daily kind of drudgery that we went through. When you've got a project that is being fought for a period of, say, 8 years, how do you keep that issue alive and fresh in people's minds? How do you keep people actively engaged for 8 years? And that requires an awful lot of behind the scenes work that's not exactly sexy, but is very, very necessary. And it involves leaving, and this is our motto, leave no stone unturned. So there's not a day that goes by where we're not working on trying to build coalition partners across the region and the state. There's not a day that goes by that we're not brainstorming new ways to keep the public engaged, meeting with new decision makers, our legal team, drafting media messages. It's just a lot of stuff that happens every day.
And I'm trying to think if there was ever a point in your guys' history now where there was maybe just one or two issues. It seems like you've always been having to fight like 3, 4, 5 things at once. And a lot of the things, and we're going to talk about this in a little while, but like a lot of the things that you guys were fighting 10 years ago, you're still fighting today. So was there ever a point where it was kind of just like one or two things? Or has it always been a half dozen?
There's no rest for the weary. And it seems like, here in the Finger Lakes, it's like playing whack-a-mole. There's no downtime. There's always an industry, a predatory corporation that's coming into our area to exploit our clean air and water, which are driving economic engine in the region, agriculture and tourism, that supplies 60,000 jobs and brings $4 billion into New York's economy every year. They rely on that clean air, that clean water, the bucolic scenery that we have here in the Finger Lakes for survival. And so it's just an enormous amount of work. And having said that, we're very proud to keep doing it.
As much as some of the things, unfortunately, have remained the same throughout all the years that you guys have been fighting this fight, one thing that has changed, and congratulations are in order, you have retired from teaching, and you are now, I guess, even more all in than you were all in before, right? So what does a normal day look like for you now?
Well, thank goodness my alarm doesn't go off at 4:30 every morning anymore, which is great. I don't have a 2-hour commute anymore, which is great. A longtime supporter of ours said something that I find very humorous, and that was that all the corporate execs are now having panic attacks because most of them didn't realize that I also was holding down a full-time job all these years while fighting their companies. So now look out, because my focus is 100% on protecting the environment in the Finger Lakes. And now I've got more time to do that.
All right, so let's talk about some of those things. I had to go through my old reporter notes to dredge up some of the things that I had actually forgotten about. But I'm going to name off a topic or two here, and then I just want you to sort of talk about whatever comes to mind, or even, if you're still actively engaged in the fight, talk to me about what you think about on that front too. Let's start with fracking, something that feels like it happened 37 lifetimes ago.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of our start into, the environmental movement, was when the threat of fracking was coming into the Finger Lakes region. And, we fought alongside millions of other New Yorkers, many major statewide organizations for years, scientists, climate activists, health experts. And we were successful in banning fracking right about the same time when we were fighting the Crestwood gas storage proposal on the south end of Seneca Lake. We were incredibly thrilled when the governor decided that it was not economically feasible, it was not healthy for New York to frack, and that most municipalities had elected to already develop moratoriums or bans on fracking so that the locations that were even willing to accept fracking in the Finger Lakes or in the whole state for that matter, was very limited anyway. Yeah. So that was, I mean, people were just basically coming out into the streets celebrating when that news broke. I believe that was back in 27. No, I can't say. I won't say. I don't remember exactly, but it was a huge celebration. And now it's kind of rearing its ugly head again. We have an EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, formerly of New York, who is pushing for fracking to be reconsidered in New York State right now. We just went to Binghamton and had a press conference with a number of other organizations to say, no way, we're not even thinking about that again. That decision was made and fought hard for, and we're not going back. And we're seeing evidence of the reasons why we banned fracking in New York. As people are saying, fracking fluids are starting to bubble up into the groundwater and the surfaces of the ground in areas where they are fracking. People are getting very, very sick. Now we have the scientific health studies to prove that children growing up in areas where there are fracking have a greater risk of serious health problems. So the evidence has gotten even stronger for defending our ban on fracking in New York State, and we're going to continue to fight that.
Is there an element of, oh God, not this again? Because this is something that really, of all the things that we're going to talk about, this seemed like the most certain to be put to bed of any of them. And yet here we are, 10, 12 years later, and this debate is coming back up again somehow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. A lot of us just could not believe that this was even a notion in anyone's head again for New York. And you're exactly right with that saying, oh no, not again. Here we go. We have to fight this again. But the response to Lee Zeldin coming to Binghamton and suggesting that we reverse that ban was met with very, very strong and forceful opposition immediately. We found out late on a Friday afternoon that he was coming to Binghamton. We were able to mobilize, 50 or 60 people in several different organizations by Monday at 10 a.m. To counter protest that announcement. And so if they think that that's something that could happen again in New York State, they're very, very wrong. We will fight them tooth and nail.
I was going to say the average person listening or watching right now is probably scratching their head a little bit because they would assume that this is a decision that lays exclusively with the state. And if the state doesn't decide to change course on this, then what can the federal government do to compel the state? Is there what can you answer that confusion at all?
That's a very good question. And I think that when we did ban fracking in New York, we were really certain that the way we did it, the way we went about it, and all of the laws that we put in place to protect New Yorkers were very, very airtight. So having said that, we know that some in the federal government are ignoring things like laws and regulatory restrictions and issuing emergency executive orders in order to try and overcome local regulations or statewide regulations. Honestly, I don't think that they have a snowball's chance in HE double hockey sticks of getting this through. But that doesn't stop them from trying. And we're going to make sure they don't succeed.
Another item or another issue that runs pretty parallel to this one in terms of breadth of time that's passed with it, landfilling and leachate. Obviously, the region has plenty of landfills. Leachate has always been a part of the conversation, but it's definitely more widely known present day than it was a handful of years ago. So when you think about those two things, what comes to mind, past, present, or future now?
Yeah, well, I think that the Finger Lakes is at a very, very pivotal point in its history, because we can either decide to be a world-class wine and tourism destination for millions of people in an area that is rich in, clean air and clean water and bucolic scenery, or we can become or remain the state's largest dumping ground. Right now, the Finger Lakes area accepts over 50% of all waste produced in New York. And the state's largest landfill, Seneca Meadows, is located right in Seneca Falls, the birthplace of women's rights, accepting 6,000 tons of garbage every single day. And they are very, very close to reaching capacity and being full. That is why their permit ended in December of 2025, because they were expected to be full and they were expected to close at that time. Now, instead of planning to cap and close that landfill, instead what Seneca Meadows has done is they have applied for an expansion. And this time, that area that they're filling up now, that mountain of garbage that you can see from miles and miles away and smell even before you see it, that's full. So what they want to do is they want to now take 6,000 tons of garbage and put it on top of a former Superfund site called the Tantalo Superfund site, which is unlined, by the way. And now they want to dump that 6,000 tons of garbage a day on top of that for another 15 years. We have really serious concerns about, if you want to think about a tube of toothpaste and you start putting bricks on top of that tube of toothpaste, eventually what's going to happen is it's going to squirt out on both ends, that toothpaste. So that's what could happen to the groundwater. You add weight to that facility. There's toxins still in the ground. That could all get pushed into our groundwater if they use this site as they plan to do. So there's a huge concern there. If they get their way, that landfill would be taller than the Statue of Liberty, including its pedestal upon completion. It would be taller than the tallest building in the closest city of New York, of Syracuse. And it's already been identified as the largest single point source of methane emissions in New York State. So as we're sitting here this summer and we're looking out at dystopian colored skies from wildfires burning, and we're having extreme temperature events, and we're even having a summer nor'easter right now where there's flooding in New York State, all across Albany in that area, and still raining here today. If you're concerned about any of those climate change influenced events that we are experiencing every single day almost here in the Finger Lakes, you don't want to expand the largest single point of methane emissions in the state any further. It can be seen by satellite from space. It's so big and it's emitting so much stuff right now. So that's a huge concern. And you mentioned leachate. Seneca Meadows produces, I believe the latest report was 65 million gallons of contaminated leachate every single year. Some of that stays in our community, and the rest of it gets trucked untreated to sewage plants. Sewage plants don't have the mechanism for removing the forever chemicals like PFAS and 1,4-dioxane that's contained in this garbage juice before it gets dumped into our waterways and upstream from people's drinking water sources all across New York State. So this is not just a local issue or even a regional issue, but this is a statewide public health crisis that we are working in partnership with other organizations to help educate and inform the public on and change the way we deal with this stuff.
And sort of connected to that is the less known, but whenever there's a headline about it, we get a handful of emails from people asking, what is this even about? Sludge.
Mm-hmm.
In the same sort of lane. Where is that, and how does that connect back to the landfill thing and waste and all of that?
Yeah, that's another very, very big concern, is that legally sewage sludge and sludge from landfills is being allowed to be spread on agricultural farmland. That means those contaminants, get into our groundwater, into our food sources. There's actually a documentary that's going to be screened that features the town of Butler, New York. We helped Butler fight off a toxic sludge factory there several years ago, and you'll get to see that documentary coming up. I believe it's this weekend is the screening. So yes, I mean, there are so many reasons why we need to change our system in New York so that we are not a throwaway culture anymore, because the impacts are not just localized to Seneca Falls or the Finger Lakes, but they're spread out all across New York State. So there is no away and throw away. And we need to make sure that we stop using that system that only benefits large, mostly out-of-state corporations. Seneca Meadows is owned by a Texas corporation, at the expense of all of the people who suffer either directly or indirectly from our current solid waste management system.
And maybe one of the larger environmental fights that's not just been happening here, but happening in a lot of places is the one against crypto mining. You obviously have taken this one up in a big way. Talk to us a little bit about what that looks like and where things stand right this second with that here in the region.
Oh boy, great question. Another huge fight on our hands here all across the Finger Lakes region. Seneca Lake Guardian originally got involved in the issue of cryptocurrency mining back in 2017, when a once shuttered coal-fired burning power plant along the shores of Seneca Lake was resurrected, retrofitted to burn fracked gas, not to provide power to the public necessarily, but to fuel thousands and thousands of crypto mining machines. When we first heard about this, we didn't even know what Bitcoin or crypto mining was. So we had to do a deep dive and learn more about what this meant. And once we became aware of what they were doing over there, we fought to shut Greenwich down. The reasons were many, one of which is that they were able to utilize the old coal-fired power plants permits that predated the Clean Water Act that allows Greenwich to withdraw 139 million gallons of Seneca Lake water every single day and then dump it back hot at temperatures up to 108 degrees Fahrenheit into the lake, which is not healthy for our aquatic life, but also a huge concern when it comes to harmful algal blooms, which are a toxin to both humans and animals. If you look at Seneca Lake Pure Water's website and they track and monitor HABs on Seneca Lake, you will notice that in recent years, the majority of the harmful algal blooms are occurring in the northwestern quadrant of Seneca Lake, where the Greenwich facility is located. When people living in that area are experiencing a HAB outbreak, they can't run their water. Most people can't afford the kind of system that is necessary to eliminate HABs from your water system. So if you can't flush your toilet, you can't shower, you can't cook, you can't give your pets drinking water if your water comes directly out of the lake in that area when there's a HAB. A lot of people are also renting Airbnbs around there. They can't continue to rent when people can't enjoy what they paid for. And so it's hurting them economically as well. So it's just a huge concern. And Greenwich became sort of the test case for how other underutilized or decommissioned power plants were going to fall across New York State. And it became a statewide call to action that resulted in a 2-year moratorium on using fossil fuel power plants like Greenwich for crypto mining. Another one of the issues is not only CO2 emissions that are coming out of the plant that are harming our climate, but also that facility is raining toxins like formaldehyde, toluene, benzene, lead, and mercury over our homes, our farms, our vineyards, and our lake every single day. And based on the prevailing winds, that doesn't mean that it just falls in Dresden, New York. That means that it hits almost the entire Seneca Lake wine trail as it continues to harm our community. Now, I don't know how long you want me to go on about this, but I will say too that we fought hard to get the Department of Environmental Conservation to deny Greenwich's Title V air permit. We prevailed. We succeeded in getting that denied. However, due to loopholes in the law, Greenwich was allowed to continue operating while they fought and appealed that decision. It was upheld not once, not twice, but 3 times in a court of law. And we were on our way back to Albany for the next court proceeding on this issue when, in a stunning reversal, Governor Hochul just pulled the plug on that whole legal process and green-lighted Greenwich's continued operation. This, unfortunately, has emboldened Greenwich to not only keep operating, but also to expand. As many cryptocurrency mining facilities are doing, they're pivoting to artificial intelligence infrastructure. And so now they own a power plant that produces 106 megawatts of power for their Bitcoin mining machines. But they've also applied to pull electricity from the grid, 260 megawatts of it, to expand into artificial intelligence on site. So they're basically tripling their energy consumption for crypto mining and AI data centers. And that's going to hit our pocketbooks because our electric bills are going to go up because of this. And we're very concerned about other things like backup diesel generation, additional water withdrawals from the lake, lots of different concerns there.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to get into that data centers and some of the other now very statewide issues that have been getting a lot of play over the last couple of months. But first, there's one other item from the history book, I guess, of this whole thing that I have to ask about. I think it's the most forgotten environmental fight you guys have taken on, but the incinerator, the incinerator proposal in Romulus. Is it hard to believe that that's the most forgotten one? Because when that was happening, that felt like the biggest thing happening in the entire Finger Lakes. It demanded all kinds of coverage across the entire state. And now, you look back at it and I'm not even sure it makes the top 5 list.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up because garbage incineration is in many cases even worse than landfilling in terms of health implications, air quality. And when we learned that there was going to be a large garbage incinerator proposal right in between Cayuga and Seneca Lakes, we jumped into action. And alarmingly, you're right. I mean, we had every elected official step up to the plate and say they didn't want this to happen. From Senator O'Mara to Senator Pam Helming to Assembly Member Phil Palmisano, Chris Friend, even Senator Schumer showed up at Ventosa Vineyards and said, we aren't going to allow this to happen. And so miraculously, what took us 8 years to accomplish with the gas storage fight only took us 2 years to accomplish with the incinerator fight. And what ultimately resulted from that is that we shut down that proposal. But not only did we do that, we got legislation passed thanks to Judith Enck from Beyond Plastics. She's former EPA administrator to Barack Obama and others. Even Senator Pam Helming championed this legislation called the Finger Lakes Community Protection Act of 2019, which put a ban on the construction of any new garbage incinerator in the Finger Lakes watershed. So we're protected from that in perpetuity now, thanks to all of that leadership and work.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into some of the real current stuff. A lot of those things are still very current. Just some of the things that have been making more statewide headlines. Data center moratorium. The governor made a very big deal about this. Reading reaction, it feels like it's kind of been mixed. I have my own feelings about it and what gaps it creates, but I'm curious, when you saw the moratorium and you read it, what stood out to you? Good enough for now, or does the state, or should the state have gone a bit further with it?
Yeah, that's really top of mind right now. Our state legislature, both the Assembly and the Senate, overwhelmingly passed what's called the Responsible Data Center Act. It would put a moratorium on the construction of any new data centers for 1 year, while some really significant environmental impact studies were completed. That was a much more robust and thorough plan. And instead of signing that bill into law, what the governor did was she issued what's called an executive order, which also places a 1 year pause. However, it's much weaker. It doesn't go far enough. It's a step in the right direction because it does acknowledge that there's a problem, but it doesn't really tackle the issue. And from reading it and talking with our legal team about this and many other statewide organizations that have worked on this issue, and I'll just say, in my opinion, the governor, and especially because of her track record, right? I mean, she greenlighted Greenwich. She gutted the climate law in the state budget this year. Now she's facing an election in a few months, a re-election. And she wanted to, in my mind, put lipstick on a pig and acknowledge that this was a problem. But if you read it, she's really favoring corporations over people. She's allowing for financial incentives to be put in place so that local communities would benefit more financially from a data center, but it doesn't necessarily address all of the concerns and the harms of people that are hosts to these communities. And I can say that we know this all too well because in 2021, Seneca Lake Guardian also founded or co-founded the National Coalition Against Crypto Mining, where we're now working in 28 different states with communities all across the country where they are being impacted by crypto mining and data centers. And we're seeing the same problems time and time again in every single community. And again, I want to mention that both the crypto mining and the AI industry, crypto miners are pivoting to AI all across the country because it's more profitable for them to do so right now. And the infrastructure is all the same. So the brand name may be changing, but the problems are all still the same.
When I read, here's my question, and you mentioned it. Is this a way to get by this election cycle? Because when I read it, and I tried reading it more as a layperson who's outside the day-to-day work, but it feels like and reads like Here's what you will need to do if you're a developer of a project like this in the future. We're kind of tipping our hand to you a little bit. Reads a little like a playbook to me, dressed up as a moratorium. Am I off base for saying that? Or does that sort of ring true?
No, Josh, I think you're spot on there. And sadly, I wish, I mean, Governor Hochul is our first female governor in New York State. I wish we had a better relationship with her on environmental issues that are key. But time and time again, she has demonstrated that she's more interested in getting donations and promoting larger predatory corporations rather than protecting her constituents. And this is just another example of that. And I don't have a lot of trust in her that she's going to do what's really necessary to protect New Yorkers. And again, yeah, this is just window dressing in our opinion.
Do you see any parallels between this and fracking and potentially a similar outcome for this as was with fracking many years ago?
I think there's definitely a potential for that. You can't shake a stick without running into another organization or community that is fighting a data center in, not only the Finger Lakes, but all of New York State. And we're very proud of that because we've been sounding the alarm on this kind of industry since 2021. And we were basically the only ones at that time. Now you've got every organization across New York and across the country addressing this issue. So we're really proud of the fact that information is getting out there. People are becoming informed and educated. They are fighting back. They are voting out elected officials who are going to favor data centers over people. So Governor Hochul is right to try and make it look like she's worried about this. But at the same time, she was just interviewed on Spectrum with Susan Arbetter, who's a wonderful reporter out of Albany. And she said straight up, she wants to now advance and encourage nuclear development in New York State to power data centers. And we can get into that subject as well, but that is a really horrible idea.
Yeah, and I want to get into nuclear in a second, but first, I do want to have you talk a little more about the climate law and the changes that happened there. I can't imagine, or maybe you did. I can't imagine though you guys thought this was coming when you entered 2026, and yet by the end of the legislative session, that's where we were. Where do you think that leaves the state now? And is there any hope that the state, next legislative cycle potentially tries to make some ground up there, or is that past the half court, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, we saw the writing on the wall pretty early on. In November, within a matter of days, she greenlighted the Greenwich facility amidst this lawsuit that was ongoing. She greenlighted the Constitution pipeline at the same time. She made a few other decisions that, it almost resulted in the band getting back together again across New York State, because people that have been fighting things like fracking and fighting for the climate law all started to see at once that we were in for some big problems with the governor. So when she decided to make some proposals within her budget to gut the climate law, we were not surprised at all. In fact, we brought busloads of people to Albany to protest during, the budget process because we saw the writing on the wall. And what she did was she changed the math and the way we calculate methane emissions, despite her own Climate Action Council's advice, to make it look like New York was getting closer to achieving its climate goals than we really are. And she also made it so that she would not be culpable in a lawsuit against her for violating New York's climate law. She didn't want to get the rap for that. So she just changed the way the law is. That resulted in the legislative session in New York being extremely short because legislators were fighting back. They were refusing to negotiate with her on the climate law. This is something that New Yorkers fought very hard for. It's a nation-leading climate law. And they went without pay for 2 months. The bills that were up for votes got delayed because the budget hadn't been finalized until literally, I want to say maybe 10 days before the legislative session was up.
Yeah.
So, we're watching the governor very carefully, and we will continue to collaborate with organizations across the state and citizens of New York who understand the gravity of climate change. We're experiencing it here in the Finger Lakes, and just make sure that she doesn't get away with this.
You mentioned nuclear. She and others have pointed to nuclear as being an option, a viable option to addressing the state's power issues that are coming down the line, not just for large load users, but for quite literally everybody who has the lights on right now. What's wrong with that approach? And why would it be a very bad move for the state to put a lot of its eggs or a lot of its energy in the nuclear basket?
So let me start by saying that we completely acknowledge the reality that energy consumption needs are increasing, particularly because of the amount of energy that AI data centers and crypto mining consume. That is one huge draw on our electric load. Energy infrastructure is old, antiquated, it needs updating. Our grid is unstable. People are experiencing more brownouts and electricity outages. So we do have a need for other electricity sources. However, having said all of that, nuclear power development is not the answer. And the reason I say that is threefold. First, it is the most expensive form of energy to develop. Secondly, it is the slowest to deploy. It takes years to build a nuclear power plant, and it often goes over budget. And then finally, the third, and in our view, a very important reason is safety issues, both in terms of, security, national security, and the fact that drones can take out nuclear power plants much more easily than before. So there's some security risks there. But secondly, radioactive waste. There is no way to safely dispose of radioactive waste. It is typically stored on site where a power plant is built. There was a Harvard study that came out in December of 2025 that said anyone living within a 19-kilometer radius from a nuclear power plant has a much greater likelihood of getting cancer and other negative health-related impacts. And forget about it if there's an accident, then that radius goes out the roof. But so for those reasons, and the fact that it does not gel with our climate solutions either, and you can talk to renowned environmental climate scientists like Dr. Bob Howarth from Cornell University, who has been studying this and happens to be on the Climate Action Council. He, among the other advisors, said they took a hard look at nuclear energy as an option for New York State and for solving our climate problems. And they concluded that that was not a viable option for the reasons I mentioned.
Yeah. And just to, also put a finer point on that as well, like transmission is the biggest issue in New York State right now. Getting power where it is created to where it actually needs to be. It continues to be the big hurdle that New York State doesn't really seem to know how to navigate. A follow-up though, and this is on the renewable side. Should it not then be much easier and quicker for renewable projects to be cited and ultimately get to the finish line? And how has the governor, given her position on everything else in the state for that matter, not figured out how to execute that part of it from your vantage point?
Hey, that is such a good question. It's really baffling how she cannot seem to grasp how renewable energy sources are actually the cheapest form of energy out there right now. California can go months without drawing from a fossil fuel plant or a nuclear power plant and supply power to the state through renewable energy resources. They're a shining example of what can be when we all push in the same direction. The governor, unfortunately, has taken instead what she calls an all of the above approach, which she wants everything to, you throw everything in a bucket and, you just scramble to get electricity from any source that you can. And that is not good for affordability. It is not a good long-term plan. And it just doesn't work for New Yorkers in terms of our electricity bills. So I hate to say it, but she is following the Trump agenda almost to a T. And for a Democratic governor in New York State to be doing that is really shameful.
I want to preface my next question with this. From my point of view, it seems like at the state level, there are a lot of contradictions or at the very least inconsistencies in all the environmental policies. So from your perspective, when you look at the state environmental reviews and the permitting systems and processes that exist now from Albany coming down, are they capable of meeting the moment?
I think a lot of work needs to be done. I don't think that the governor is thinking long term. I think she's thinking about her donation coffers, and that leads to significant problems for every New Yorker. And as long as she fails to listen to her advisors on affordability, on viable solutions for our energy needs, we are going to be struggling as New York residents. So it's time for her to really turn a corner and acknowledge the reality of our situation and realize what we need to do to be a sustainable, healthy, affordable New York.
2 questions left, and I'll get you out of here onto the rest of your day. Thinking long term, if we fast forward to, say, 2040, what would tell you that the region and the state made all the right choices on the environment, and what would tell you that it screwed up along the way and things did not? Like, is there anything that you can think of that would or would not be in 2040 in the Finger Lakes if the state were trying to wrap its arms all the way around the environmental issues?
What we have here in the Finger Lakes is a true gift. And maybe if you've lived here your whole life and you haven't traveled to other parts of the country or even the world, you don't realize that, or you take it for granted. But what we have in the Finger Lakes is completely unique. We have abundant, clean, fresh water. We have fresh air. We have a relatively healthy environment where we have really created not only a way of life for the people living here, but a viable economic platform where we benefit financially from what our driving economic engine in the region is. And that is agriculture, that is tourism, that is wine, the wine industry. All of those things support us and support workers in the area. We are not opposed to economic development by any means, but we encourage the state to do a thoughtful risk versus reward analysis on any proposal coming into the region before greenlighting it. Many corporations come in with the promise of tax revenue and jobs, and many struggling rural communities in the Finger Lakes are drawn to that. Town board members are courted and wooed by slick lawyers who come in with these promises that never pan out. And instead of doing that, we need to protect the Finger Lakes, our way of life, and our economy that is sustainable. So what I would see moving forward for New York is a more thoughtful evaluation and permitting process. We are talking about things like rights of nature laws for the Finger Lakes region. We're also continuing to push Congress to designate the Finger Lakes as a national heritage designation. This was something that was introduced by Senator Gillibrand almost a decade ago. It's still working its way through Congress, but that would afford the Finger Lakes a little extra protection to preserve and protect our way of life and what we have here, because it is priceless. And I will also say too, with trillions of gallons of fresh drinking water in the Finger Lakes, the way things are going in this world and water scarcity is occurring all over the world, we are sitting on abundant fresh water. And many people have predicted that water is the next oil. It is one of our most valuable resources. And we need to protect that drinking water above all things. So that's, I hope, answering your question. In my mind, every day that I look outside and see what we are blessed with, I'm going to be here to fight it. And I hope others will join us.
And that's actually where I want to wrap. This show, at the end of the day, is about community and the future. So when you think about all the time and the community that you guys have built between activists, wineries, farmers, small businesses, even policymakers, what's your message to people who might be feeling a little down or a little overwhelmed by all of the things? What's your message to maybe inspire or give them reason to just keep going?
Yeah, it's easy to get overwhelmed and, quite frankly, pretty depressed about the state of affairs out there. But what I will say is when I look around rooms and look around at my neighbors, I am continuously renewing my hope that we will succeed. We will not give up. If you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is too much, I would urge people, your listeners, to do whatever it is they can, whether it's sign a petition, sign up for email updates. Seneca Lake Guardian has worked very hard to make it very easy for people to get involved. If you sign up and get notifications from us, we'll walk you through simple ways that you can do a thing or two that take only a few minutes of your time to do your part to protect our way of life here, to be aware of what's coming, what potential legislation you might want to watch out for, and just do your part, play your part no matter what it is, and join us in this fight. It's worth protecting.
Yvonne, thanks so much for joining us today. Keep up the great work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Josh.